I've spent the last few years working for one of the largest shockwave clinics in North America, and I've learned a thing or two about the power and untapped potential of regenerative medicine. But the march towards a future where sickness is healed from its root cause is challenged by the influence of big pharma and their deep pockets. So now we're forced to answer questions like, how do we get rid of joint pain, take back our performance in the bedroom, and heal diseases from the inside out without band-aid medications or negative side effects? This show will give you the answers. Follow along as I interview the world's top experts and doctors and how they transform their lives and their patients' lives using the newest advances in biotechnology. I'm your host, Austin James Wolfe, and you're listening to Modern Biotech Radio. What's up, Rocket Nation? I'm your host, Austin James Wolfe, and today we have a very special guest. This is Brooke Sprowl. She is the founder and clinical director of MyLaTherapy. Thanks for jumping on the show, Brooke.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So the reason why I reached out in the first place is because I was looking for good sex therapists to interview on the show because men, our customers and clients, they're guys who just they want to have better sex, they want to have better intimacy with their partners, and so I thought what better way to help them out than to interview certain sex therapists.
Absolutely. Just to clarify, I'm not technically a sex therapist. I am a psychotherapist. I work with erectile dysfunction. I work with kink, BDSM. I work with intimacy and sexual issues, couples, relationships. But I'm not technically a sex therapist. So I just want to represent myself that, yes, I work with those issues, but not like certified or.
Right. That makes sense. Cool. Sweet. Well, let me ask you this. You talked about helping men with erectile dysfunction and other sexual related issues. Is that technically considered sex therapy, or is that more what you called it? Was it psycho?
I'm a psychotherapist.
Okay, got it.
Sexual issues, but a sex therapist would have specific training in a range of issues.
Okay, cool.
Related to sex, whereas I have some training in that and certain experience with certain issues. But I don't really have the same breadth and depth as a sex therapist, really just with that one particular issue regarding sex therapy, and then other issues regarding like intimacy, communication, and couples.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you this. If you had to define it to one thing, what's like your superpower when it comes to helping people?
My superpower is identifying unconscious anxieties and defense mechanisms and getting into the unconscious forces that are driving them, teaching people to identify, become aware of them, regulate their anxiety, and get to the deeper conflict or feeling underneath. So people don't realize they're anxious half the time, and performance anxiety during sex is a perfect example of that.
Right.
And so for me, teaching somebody to recognize what is it that's tipping off that we know they're anxious. There's so many different pathways to anxiety.
Yeah.
And people don't realize what they are. So, we know that racing heart is anxiety. We know that racing thoughts are anxiety, but there's a lot of different ways that anxiety can manifest. It can be dizziness, it can be mind going blank, it could be feeling sick to your stomach, it could be showing tension in the body. And so I'm really honed in on looking at cues that you may not be aware of that are signaling us that you're anxious. And anytime there's anxiety, there's something deeper. There's a deeper feeling, there's a conflict, and then when we get to that thing that's underneath that's driving that anxiety, we can work through it, we can release it, and then the symptom goes away.
Right. Is there like a common, I guess, thread that you see that most people have? Is there a common thing that gives them this anxiety, or is there a common root cause?
So avoidance is kind of the, essence of anxiety.
Really?
Engine of anxiety. Yeah. Anytime we avoid something, then we're not facing that underlying thing, and it can't get released. There's like a backlog. There's a pressure valve that gets kind of capped. And so when we avoid things, then they build up inside of us, and it creates this kind of chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
And so facing those things and facing things that we're afraid of, facing feelings, resolving conflicts, resolving underlying trauma, looking at things that are ugly that we don't want to look at. That is really, so if avoidance is the engine of anxiety, then exposure or facing what's feared is the antidote to it.
Right. That makes sense. And without, I guess, discussing or breaking doctor-patient confidentiality. Is there a common thing that you find that men who might have performance anxiety, is there a common thing that you find that they are avoiding? Is there a common theme within the avoidance?
So in this case, what I experience, I mean, there's a combination of factors. For the first time in history, we're seeing erectile dysfunction in men in their 20s.
Yeah.
Because,
Wow.
yes, this has never happened before, because
Wow.
you can see more naked women in a span of 60 seconds than they used to be able to see in an entire lifetime. So
Right.
their brains are actually becoming desensitized to stimuli that would normally provoke arousal. And
Right.
so when when you watch porn, it actually changes your brain. You develop a tolerance in the same way that if you drink a lot of alcohol, you develop a tolerance to alcohol, and then it becomes less powerful. If you never drink, one glass of wine makes you tipsy. If
Right.
you drink every day, it doesn't even affect you at all. So it's a similar thing with porn. And because men are biologically wired to be visual and biologically wired, quite frankly, to have a lot of partners and have a strong drive towards sex, especially in their 20s. It's really the fact that porn is at like the tips of our fingers. It's really hard to resist. It's just so easy. It's so anonymous. And I'm not saying it's wrong or bad, but finding a balance and making sure that it's not creating excess is really important, because otherwise, men just can't get excited about one naked woman in front of them. I mean, it's really sad. But there's also a piece of, I think, porn culture that, creates some unrealistic expectations, not only in the sense of, men's expectations of women or their, what gives them arousal, but also in terms of how they have to perform. Like, they have to be this.
Be like this rock star, that's doing 20 videos a day.
Yeah, so that really contributes to performance anxiety, and and also feelings of self-worth and self-esteem get wrapped up in performance, sexual performance. I mean, that's what it means to be a man, right?
Right.
It's like these conquests or these, the way you perform. And there's a lot in the culture that is just constantly kind of bombarding men in the same way that women are constantly bombarded with the messages that their value is in their beauty or their value is in their youth. Men are bombarded with, messages that, how big their dick is or how long they can go is their worth. And, it's really damaging, and it's just not true. I mean, there's some people that buy into all that, but those aren't the people you want in your lives.
Right. I agree. Well, let's say a guy is suffering from performance anxiety because he's, watching porn every day, and now he's like starting to get into his head. What sort of treatment would you recommend this guy do to overcome that?
Well, you really have to, talk through these underlying issues and causes. You really have to restrict your porn use. That's a big part of it. But it's also kind of, working with false beliefs, irrational thoughts through cognitive therapy. So dealing with ways that your expectations of yourself are unrealistic, and finding more balanced ways of seeing the world. And then also really getting to like, why is my worth wrapped up in my performance, whether it's in sex or whether it's in other areas of our lives. That's ego. And ego is inherently fragile because our circumstances are always changing. Our circumstances, we can never rely on the external to stay the same. And therefore, if our sense of self is reliant on the external, it's subject to the whims of life, and it's always changing. And, one moment we're on top of the world, and the next moment we're a worthless piece of crap, So, and forgive my obscenities.
It's all good. We've had worse on the show.
So in any case, you would want to look at the cognitive piece through cognitive behavioral therapy and restructuring thoughts, as well as sort of the self-worth piece, the underlying feelings, like where did you learn that your worth is based on not just who you are, but on what you do, on how you perform, on, your sexual prowess, on how many women you can get. That's not real self-worth. That's a very shallow way to define yourself. And And that's something that's a much deeper issue that we have to kind of look at the past and the influences that shaped you. Usually your parents modeled that for you in some way and you've internalized that. Even, one of the interesting things that I found is, and in my own personal psychotherapy and then working with others, my parents are lovely and supportive, and they actually didn't put pressure on me. They encouraged me, they pushed me, but they never really had this high expectations that I needed to do this, and this to be loved. And actually I excelled because of that, because I didn't have that pressure. I was motivated to achieve on my own, but they're very hard on themselves. They can be perfectionistic in certain ways. And so I internalized that even though they weren't giving me that message.
Right.
And so something that people often don't realize is they go, gosh, I'm broken because my parents were so great and they were so supportive, so this must be my problem. And it's like, yeah, but not what did they say, but what did they model to you? That is what children internalize through osmosis. It's like how your parents relate socially, how they deal with their anxiety and defenses. We tend to adopt the same coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms that our parents model to us.
Right. Wow. That's super interesting. Huh. I'll have to look out for that one. Let me ask you this. Is there something that if guys come to you for therapy, what's something that they can do by themselves that might give them better results through the therapy? Like, is there something that they can do either before they see you or while they're seeing you, by themselves? Is there an exercise they can do that can really amplify the results and the benefits they're going to get?
Well, it's really an individual thing. My interventions are tailored to the individual. And
right.
If you watched my therapy session with one person and my therapy session with another person, they could feel completely different.
Right.
With some people, I'm going into visualization. I'm going into the body and, what different sensations are coming up, and kind of, you really, the way to act, the body is the landscape of the unconscious. So, and the visual, the metaphor, kind of the realm of the right brain is where the unconscious lives. And our culture is very left brain heavy, and pop psychology says, just analyze everything. And if you just understand that this happened to you in your childhood, this is why you behave like that, that's healing. That's BS. That's not. Most people come in and they can analyze themselves so they're blue in the face. But until we actually get to the unconscious forces, nothing's going to change. But I'm kind of getting off track with your question, but I'll finish this thought and then answer it. So in any case, with some people, I'm really working on the cognitive level. I'm really working with their thoughts, because they're in their left brain and they're not ready to go into the experiential, we're still working with the unconscious and bringing awareness to things that are, blind spots in a different way.
Yeah.
But we're not just analyzing. And in fact, if somebody's just intellectualizing, which is a defense mechanism, I'm going to point that out to them and draw them into what's beneath that. Other people, like I said, I'm going super deep into these sometimes the visuals can be it's just go with whatever's in your head. It's a little bit of a psychoanalytic approach, and surprising things come up, well, I'm in a dirt hole, or and there's snakes around me, or it's really cool kind of mythical imagery that you work through and you work with. In any case, in answer to your question, I think the number one thing to do to make therapy most effective is to come in with a humble disposition, but also to trust yourself. Don't just defer to a therapist and oh, they have this degree, so whatever they say is right. You still have to check in with your gut. You still need to make sure you have a therapist that you trust, that challenges you, that you really intuitively go, yes, this is right. But you need to come in with the ability to be wrong and the ability to reevaluate yourself. Because if you come in knowing it all and no one can help you and you're the smartest person in the room, I work with really smart people who are smarter than me, but that doesn't mean that I can't challenge them psychologically, and that I have a skill set or a type of intelligence or experience that, is valuable to them. And it's really fun for me to go toe to toe with people who are geniuses, near 200 IQ, and
oh my God, that sounds fun.
It's so fun. It's challenge them is a little bit, that's probably my own little ego boost, and maybe not the best, but
a little pat on the back.
Yeah, it's a fun puzzle and it's a fun challenge, and and I kind of love the intellectual aspect and the creative aspect of working with different kinds of people.
Yeah.
It's like every session is different.
Right, because everyone's different. Okay, I got a question for you. So I was working with I have a life coach, and I was working with him, and I had a really bad breakup, and I was trying to solve it intellectually for like a year. Like it was bad, and I finally asked him, like, okay, I need your exactly, I need your help on this. And you know what he said? He asked me, he goes, Austin, we can solve this two ways. He said we can either solve it with your right brain or your left brain. And I don't know, something inside of me knew that the right brain would actually work, because I've been trying to use my left brain and analyze myself out of the situation. So I was like, let's go right brain. And it worked. We got to the root cause of the issue, and we were able to, change certain beliefs that I had.
You go a right brain. Like, what tools did you use to access that?
Oh man, God. Well, afterwards, I felt like I blacked out, for a sec. So let me think. It was, gosh, it was really getting into the feelings of what I was feeling back then, what I was feeling right now, right, and what I could be feeling in the future. So
getting into your emotional experience.
Yeah.
What a lot of people do is they rationalize. They go, and actually my book is called Why You Should Date Emotionally Unavailable Men. Use your unhealthy relationships to transform. And I read it toward women because the culture is directed toward women. The man is emotionally available, but it can apply to men as well. And what happens is we go, this partner is wrong for me because X, Y, and Z. And so I need to be over them, and I need to move on, and I need to break up. But if you haven't actually learned the lessons that are presented to you within the relationship, you're not going to move on. You're either going to keep getting back together, or you're going to stay apart and obsess and not move forward, or you're going to repeat, most likely, you're going to repeat the same dynamics with the next person until you use this relationship as a mirror to see your own blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get the experiential shift. You're just going to get, oh, this person's wrong for me. You're going to scapegoat them.
Yeah.
And you're not going to see your role and how you co-create the problems. Everybody, we have such a stupid approach in the West toward thinking about emotions and thinking about relationships. It's very binary. It's you're right, or I'm right, you're wrong. And then we get into this lawyering match and this tug of war of who's right and who's wrong. And in every instance, we're both right and we're both wrong.
Yeah.
In every instance, even in instances where one partner is being really abusive, there are ways in which the other person is complicit. Now, that's not to excuse the horror of abuse or minimize it.
Right.
That's still wrong. And there's no justification for that. But until we look at the ways that we're complicit, until we look at the ways that we're playing into the cycles and behavior, we're never going to move on. Even if we move on with a particular partner, we're going to still have, first of all, like I said before, we're going to repeat the same dynamics with other partners or get back together. But regardless, we're still going to have that conflict, that codependency, that blind spot within ourselves. And that's going to affect us in other ways. It, alienates us from ourselves, from knowing ourselves, from trusting ourselves. It affects our self-esteem. And usually it plays out in other relationships to greater and lesser extents.
Right. That makes complete sense. Well, that's a perfect transition of what I wanted to ask you about was your book, Why You Should Date Emotionally Unavailable Men. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know you touched on it just now, but I guess, can you repeat the main concept?
So that's one piece of it that I mentioned, but the subtitle kind of, captures the essence. Use your unhealthy relationships to transform. I've found in my personal life that there is nothing that is a greater threshing ground for my own spiritual development more than my relationships.
Yeah.
Somehow things get brought up and triggered that don't come up as much in friendships or work or, other things. Somehow, relationships just have a way of, people we're attracted to have a way of touching our nerves, of accessing our greatest vulnerabilities, of sometimes bringing out the worst in us.
Yep.
And that's the opportunity, because that doesn't happen if it's not already there. We go, this person treated me that way, and that's why I feel that way. That's a false, narrative and a false view of the situation. It's really, this thing is already inside me, this insecurity, this unresolved conflict, and this person is just showing me where that is. And actually, if we can view it this way, it's like a perfect guide and a perfect mirror for exactly where we need to go to heal, which can be really challenging to know until those things are provoked. And so I see unhealthy relationships rather as like you're broken, you're wrong, as a really healthy striving toward healing. We're moving into this because there's something, unresolved that we need to heal. And if you do it right, and if you see it as a way to work on yourself, rather than just trying to change the other person and tell them they're wrong and get them to acquiesce in some way, then there's incredible amounts of growth that I can testify to in my personal life, and as well in the people that I work with. I've just seen it a million times, and I've seen it a million times where people leave a relationship because it's an emotionally unavailable person, and it doesn't work. If you break up out of, F you and I'm done, and, that kind of like attitude of just like a breaking point, it's not going to stick. If you break up, or at least you're not going to be resolved and at peace about it, you're not going to move on. Whereas if you really, I think of relationships, unhealthy relationships, as like a spiritual surrendering process. Like you're really surrendering, like you're like, wow, why do I like this person? I know it's messed up, but there's something for me to learn here. Let me surrender to the lessons that are before me. And I find it really like a profound way to grow spiritually and psychologically.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this. Let's say a guy is dating a girl right now, and she's emotionally unavailable, or there's some problem in the relationship. Should they just let it play out so he can learn these lessons? Or do you think that he should just do some like reflecting right now, and then he's like, okay, she really isn't the one. Maybe I should just learn these lessons now, today, and then just move on?
Well, it's a really active process. It's not just like, let it play out. You
Right.
have to be much, like, otherwise, like, you're not doing yourself anything.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly what I'm saying. Yes, I'm saying surrender and wait until you get to a point where you truly are no longer interested.
Right.
Like my relationships that they were unhealthy, at first I was just hooked in, and there was that like kind of magnetism. I call it wounded magnet syndrome. Like we have
wounded magnet syndrome. Interesting.
Yeah, we have these complementary defenses that, like the polarity, the plus minus of magnets, draw us together and hook us in. That is exactly what we need to work with, but we need to do that in an active process. So the way that I've worked with it is, it's a big part of it is really just showing up and communicating our truths vulnerably, humbly, compassionately, with love. So I have a few rules of communication. And in my experience, when we just show up and are truthful rather than trying to change the other person, and when we take responsibility for what's ours and we're open to hearing, what our contribution is, unhealthy relationships organically resolve, and we no longer are attracted to the person. That charge, that electricity goes away when we resolve whatever our unconscious baggage is that is creating that polarity and that draw.
Yeah.
So, some of my rules for communication, and this isn't all of them, the book goes into it more, but one of them is you start with me. You start with, I spent, we have this dynamic between us, and it's like you give a neutral description of the dynamic.
Yeah.
When this, I noticed that, I nag because I sense that you're distant, and you distance yourself because I nag, and we've gotten ourselves into this dynamic that neither of us like, and I noticed that, when I am nagging, I'm actually just feeling really scared. I'm feeling really vulnerable. I'm feeling afraid that you're going to leave me. And instead of coming to you and looking into your eyes and saying, hey, are we okay? I'm worried. I'm sad. I feel alone. I'm nagging you because I'm afraid to alienate you through being vulnerable, but instead I'm alienating you through nagging you. So that's my part, and then going and, kind of, I think the same might apply for you. I mean, first inviting their, feedback, reflection, their point of view. And hopefully your partner kind of volunteers that and owns up to it. But if not, you can go, and what I'm seeing with you is, when you're feeling distant, maybe you can come to me and tell me how you're feeling. Are you feeling scared? Because typically there's these kind of, there's different attachment styles. I call it Velcro people and vanishers. So Velcro people, and the technical terms are preoccupied attachment and avoidant attachment.
Yeah.
I like the terms because they evoke what they, the essence of
Pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, exactly. So Velcro people, we all know them. They're the clingy people. They're the needy people. They want constant attention and constant closeness. And that's because their greatest fear is abandonment. And the only way they feel secure in a relationship is if they're in like constant contact. Whereas vanishers are people who feel safe when they're by themselves. Their greatest fear is being engulfed, losing themselves in somebody else. And so they're constantly trying to feel safe through distance. And that's this tug of war that we find so often in codependent relationships.
Yeah.
So in any case, the Velcro person needs to learn to tolerate space, and the vanisher needs to learn to tolerate togetherness. And a healthy, secure attachment can tolerate both space and togetherness in balance. And both people need to learn to communicate their needs vulnerably again, instead of just trying to get the other person to be different, trying to get the other person to spend more time, trying to get the other person to give them more space. That just creates these kind of endless loops of fighting and tug of war that can just really be broken when we show up in a different way, when we address the core issue rather than just addressing the symptom.
Right.
So I have this like stupid joke that I'm going to write a book called "The Dishwasher is Not a Proxy for Love," because every couple I've ever worked with, maybe with one exception in 10 years, has like had blowout fights about the dishes. And like,
really,
it's amazing. It just cracks me up because it's like, it's obviously not about the dishes, right?
Yeah.
Like the dishes take on this like symbolic, like they like so much gets displaced on these like trivial, like these trivial objects.
Yeah.
But really every fight is a dishwasher fight. Every fight is not about the thing you think you're fighting about. It's not about the dish. It's not about the in-laws or the kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how you're fighting. It's about how it's about how we're not addressing the deeper issues, which are the fears, which are the doubts, are we communicating with kindness? Are we accusing each other? Are we being, blaming rather than, just kind of trying to be a team and collaborate and understand how we can both improve? So those are the core issues. And these things that we get caught up in, like, are you spending you need to spend more time with me, are really just distracting us from dealing with the deeper issues. And then we never move forward. It's that hamster wheel.
Interesting. And is this concept at all related to what I've seen on your website called washing machine relationships?
So I know there's a lot of household metaphors.
I like them, Sprowlisms.
A couple, actually, just those two. But the washing machine relationships is different. It's the idea that we just keep going back in that same endless cycle that we were talking about earlier, whether that's the same person or with somebody else, if we don't learn those lessons.
Right. Oh my gosh. Wow. I feel like, me and my girlfriend have been dating for like a year. We haven't fought about the dishes yet. I'll have to keep on the lookout for that one.
Just make sure you don't get caught up in the dish. You're like, okay, clearly this isn't about the dish. What's it really about?
Right. Awesome. Okay. I got one more question, and then we'll jump over to our secret behind the scenes Q&A. I also saw another, maybe this is a Sprowlism. What's broken compass syndrome?
So pop psychology tells us that because we're dating emotionally unavailable men, because we have these unhealthy relationships, we have a broken picker. There's something wrong with us. We need to pick different guys. We need to pick the nice guy. And one of the chapters in my book is called The Myth of the Nice Guy. And it's this idea that we're supposed to like these guys who like really are not like just good guys. They're actually codependent. And that's why we're turned off by them, is because they don't know themselves, and they're trying to lose themselves in a relationship in the same way that, often we do. And so we're like, ugh, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So the idea of broken compass syndrome is this cultural lore and misinformed but well-meaning pop psychology that all of our friends and our family often instill in us, is like, you're doing it wrong. You need to be less picky. You need to be more picky. You need to date nice guys. You need to, stop dating these jerks. It causes us to distrust our intuition. And then we don't get the lessons that we need. We end up breaking up. We end up going through these washing machine relationships. And our intuition is our most precious guide in life and in relationships. If we're drawn to someone, our souls are telling us that there's something there for us. Doesn't mean they're, our partner for life, but there's something there for us to learn. And overriding your intuition and trying to convince yourself to be with someone because they check some boxes and seem like a nice person is doing a disservice to yourself, because you're really not listening to yourself, which means you're not loving yourself. You're not honoring yourself. You're not, the spiritual and psychological process is about surrender. It's like, I'm flawed and I've got to surrender to that flaw or to those flaws. And how can I learn from them and how can I grow from them? So broken magnet syndrome, or broken compass syndrome rather, is like that compass of intuition is broken because we have this string of unsuccessful relationships. We learn to distrust ourselves, and then we override our intuition rather than using it as the important compass and navigational tool that it is.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. What if, let me ask you this. If there's a single guy out there and he wants to get into a relationship, what's the number one piece of advice you can give him?
What's the number one piece of advice that I can give a single guy looking for a relationship? It's a tough question for some reason. I don't know why. Kind of back to our last comment. I think that was my first response. I just didn't want to repeat myself.
Right. Yeah.
Trusting your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy to convince yourself that somebody is right for you or should be right for you, and then to feel bad about yourself for not liking them. And really, there's no right or wrong to love. There's no right or wrong to who we're drawn to. And a lot of times we second guess ourselves and we try to force things that, aren't really there. Or we have some feelings, like we have a strong connection, but there's something missing. We don't have that X factor. We don't have that full, breadth of, what we want. Like we may have a deep connection emotionally and spiritually, but, we don't have an intellectual connection or a creative connection, which can be really important to some people. And for some people, they don't care. They just want somebody, they want more of a companion, so everybody's individual values are different and what they fall in love with. But there's a lot of ideas out there that are like, you just need to be realistic and stop thinking that everything's just going to be perfect. It's like, of course things aren't going to be perfect, but that doesn't mean that you can't be passionately in love with someone and have a healthy relationship. It's still messy. It's still hard. You still have to work through stuff and, all these unconscious triggers that we inevitably find in relationships. But that's the imperfect, healthy relationship. It's not, well, I just have to settle and be like, it's cool that I don't really love this person. There's actually this poem that I love called Date a Girl Who Doesn't Read. And it's all about, it's such a perfect, it's too long for me to share, but.
Oh, damn. I'll have to put a link on it.
If anybody's interested,
what's it called?
It's called Date a Girl Who Doesn't Read. And it's so funny. It's sort of an ironic poem. And it's basically about the fear of finding somebody you're truly in love with because they can hurt you. But it's date a girl who doesn't read, find her in the weary squalor of a dive bar, and find common interest in folk music and build an impenetrable bastion on that ground. Just the superficiality. And then it talks about propose to her at your favorite restaurant and, pretend that you don't feel your stomach becoming a pane of broken glass. Or I'm not getting it exactly right.
Yeah.
It's those relationships that are so not the thing, not the juice, not the, the challenge, and they're just comfortable and safe and just kind of the path that happens. And it's just, I love it. It's beautiful. And then it talks about just the terror of what it means, what a girl who reads is and how she approaches relationships. I'm probably butchering it. You can cut this part of the interview if it doesn't.
Yeah.
You're yeah, definitely. My audience doesn't like poetry. No.
They're going to like this one.
It's a good poem. I may not be capturing it quite, but check it out.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much, Brooke, for coming on the show. We're going to jump into the secret behind the scenes for our clients and customers. But before we do that, where can more people learn about you?
Best way to learn about me is at MyLaTherapy.com. There's a lot of information about therapy, our specific specializations. I'm not the only therapist in our practice. We have, several therapists that have different specializations. So we really have the gamut covered. We also have wellness professionals, massage therapists, hypnotherapists, life coaching, all sorts of stuff, even like stretch therapy, personal training. So we really have the whole gamut covered, but our main focus is psychotherapy, and we have a huge range of really talented, wonderful clinicians. My rule is I only hire people that I like, that I like personally just really jive with, that are warm and open, that don't hide behind the veil of professionalism, and that just know their stuff, because I just let them fly. I mean, we have consultation where we challenge each other. It's every couple of weeks, but for the most part, I hire people that I just know they're going to do their thing, and it's going to be great.
Oh, that's awesome. And is your book out?
I am hoping to publish it February 1st. I've been sitting on it for so long, and it's just like the most minute details. It's like, I need to do like the table of contents and the back cover and get it to ebook format. It's like so simple, but like I have so many other priorities that it keeps getting, pushed to the bottom because it's not technically urgent.
Right.
But I do have like a likely feature in the New York Times and Oprah magazine coming up.
Holy shit.
I need to get it out because those are kind of big,
Yeah, those are kind of big. That's awesome.
Kind of big, really big things that could drive a lot of people to the site. So I'd love to have it out ASAP so that, I can have something to, present when people visit my site other than just our therapy services.
Right. That's awesome. And it's why you should date emotionally unavailable men, right?
Yeah. Use your unhealthy relationships to transform. The URL for that is mylatherapy.com/unavailable. And then if you're interested, like if you're somebody who's interested in interviewing me or kind of hiring me for public speaking or workshops or anything like that, my media experience and like press experience and speaking experience, video, film, etc., is all at brookesprowl.com. It actually forwards to mylatherapy.com. The press, there's also the press button on the navigation. So if people are interested in learning about that, that's the place to find it. Brooke Sprowl, BrookesProwl.com, or just mylatherapy.com. And then I think it might be -press, but you can just press the press button on the far right of the navigation.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brooke. We're about to jump into the secret behind the scenes, but thanks for coming on the public show. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Want to see what the top experts have to say behind the scenes? Just go to modernbiotechradio.com and you'll get instant access to every behind the scenes interview for free. Now, these interviews are not for the public, so please don't share. But if you'd like to pull back the curtain with me and learn what secrets they reveal, just go to modernbiotechradio.com and get instant access to these interviews for free. Again, that's modernbiotechradio.com. If you'd like to learn the best kept secrets that they can't share publicly but allowed me to share in private, just go to modernbiotechradio.com and get instant access to all of these interviews completely free. I'll see you there.